So we've set the inflator, we've got the limiter going. The next thing that we're going to work on basically is some reductive EQ, basically some subtractive EQ. And to do that, we're going to use the FabFilter Pro Q2. The first thing I'm going to do is just switch this from zero latency mode to linear phase. Basically, without getting too far into this, linear phase EQ is a highly, highly accurate form of EQ, but it's also just more CPU intensive. But for mastering, that's completely cool, right? Because we're not using as many plugins to begin with. So basically, linear phase EQ just kind of keeps all of the frequencies 100% in phase. In other words, meaning kind of all of the frequencies just pass through the EQ at the same exact speed, which at the end of the day, that results in zero phase issues between any of the bands. So generally speaking, zero latency mode will get the job done for you kind of in your mix downs and whatnot. But I would just go ahead and turn on linear phase mode when it comes time to mastering, because you're really not going to be doing any additional damage or anything like that. Like it's kind of a good precaution to take regardless. So linear phase mode is on. I'm going to switch the channel mode to mid-side because we're going to be doing some mid-side stuff to kind of kick this off. And actually, before we go into the mid-side stuff, let's just focus in on 3 focal points kind of in the mix. There's usually a good amount of frequency buildups, or at least I've found that there's a good amount of frequency buildups in these 3 ranges. So these are the first things that I'm going to try to kind of address. So usually there's one right around 1K. So what I'm going to do is just kind of create a notch. I usually like to be kind of around a Q of 8, but I might start just a little wider so I can really hear what is going on in this frequency range. And I'm just going to use the headphone button to kind of hone in and listen for these frequencies. And what I'm going to do is sweep through until I hear something kind of resonant or ugly or something that I'm just kind of defining maybe as a bit honky over here in that 1K range. So let's listen for that. And I mean, it's pretty clear as day. If I sweep around, I might find some other frequencies, but to me, it's pretty much huge right at 1044. Yeah, so we're just going to go in here and do about 1 dB of gain reduction. Again, about a Q of 8 is where I find I'm generally at, but we could go a little wider potentially. And let's hear how that sounds in the mix. And then I think another spot that I'm usually finding a buildup is in that whole 3 to 5K range. So let's just do the same thing here. We're going to kind of create a boost. I'm going to go a little wider than 8 and just listen for what frequencies are building up for me. So I'm actually hearing it a bit low. It's usually or lower than usual. I usually find this kind of frequency spot more in that 3 to 5K range, but right now it's just below 3K, which is fine. We don't need to set ourselves, we don't need to be guided by any rules that we've predetermined. So let's just do the same thing here. We're going to subtract this by 1 dB. I'm going to get a little more narrow here just because I don't think this is quite as wonky or honky of a sound. This is really more just resonant sharpness that, played at loud volumes. This will help smooth out the overall master here. And then the one other range that I generally like to look for is right around 200. There's usually going to be something in the bass, if it wasn't mixed well, that can result in some real muddy, rounded sounds that almost sound like underwater. You'll kind of hear what I'm talking about once I solo this, but let's try to find that. We'll just do a half a dB. It doesn't really sound that bad to me, so we'll be super subtle on this. And let's actually keep it right at 8. We can be a bit more narrow down here. And now all we're going to do is kind of from this point, I want to make sure that there's no like information on the sides of this mix, basically below 200. Everything down there that's super stereo is just going to kind of muddy up the low end and mess up this mix. We don't really need almost any stereo information down there. So again, I'm going to use the headphones knob here and just basically sweep up until I start hearing some side information, right? Because I've toggled into side mode. And let's just cut away some of that leftover stuff down there. And then kind of as a precaution, let's just take the remaining mids and we'll just cut them right at 30 hertz. And I'm going to leave this at a 12 dB slope. Yeah, I mean, that's going to get the job done for now. We might do some additive EQ later on in the mastering chain, but for right now, for the purposes of just getting this mix under control, making it as optimal as possible, and again, just enhancing what is already been given to us, this is pretty much all I would do on the reductive side of things when it comes to EQ.